Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. So, I haven't been doing much apart from getting, well, just whatever I feel like painted, so, yeah. I've moved on to something I've been enjoying a lot more recently, and that is painting battle mechs. So, I'm moving on with this Griffin that I've painted up. So as you can see, I've picked out some colours. Since I like camo patterns, I'm going to do another one. I'm going to aim for more of a desert pattern this time around. As a preview for how I'll be finishing this off, I'm also going to employ a lot more scale modelling techniques, or rather, practice them. So this stage is dead easy, just get all the base coating done, so let's skip through it. Yeah, the first colour I am using, I believe, is Leather Brown from the Vallejo game colour range. This will take at least 3 coats to go on, so let's skip through it till the end, shall we? If I felt like it, I could have applied the stage with the airbrush, but I chose not to, mostly because I tend to work on projects as a slow burn over a couple of days due to, maintaining a full-time job and all, as well as trying to paint little plastic things. So I'm okay with like doing a layer, putting it down, and then coming back a couple of hours later. So yeah, this is a fairly time-consuming process, fairly boring, as usual. My paint mix is very thin because I really want to try and preserve as much detail as I can. So yeah, definitely, patience is a virtue in any form of miniature painting. So if you're like me in any way, I definitely recommend having a couple of projects on the go. Like while I was doing this guy, I was also painting another mech, a 3D print actually, which I might do more videos on the 3D printed battle mechs in future, because as a preview, I have recently got access to a colleague who has access to a resin printer, and quite frankly, the detail level that comes out of that thing is remarkable. Yeah, I'll cover more of this in a future video. But in the meantime, just continue to watch me base coating, and I think we're on pretty much my final layer. So now we'll move on to the camo pattern. In the first video, I tried to do a soft edge camo by stippling on. This time I want to do hard edged. So all you need to do with this, in a way it's much easier. You just sketch out the areas with a brush, and then this will take about 2 to 3 coats. Gradually fill them in until you've got some definitive shapes. I like doing circular blotches of roughly equal size, covering about 1/3 of the surface of the mech. Of course, you can always do multiple colors. I definitely recommend highly contrasting colors. Such as a dark gray and a black, or or a light gray and a dark gray. Basically, want each of the colors to stand out, because lately I've been finding, especially with the techniques I use, that if you have 2 colors that are too similar, the 2 will get lost in each other. Well, technically that works as camo. You actually want the camo pattern to be visually striking. So yeah, I let this go for about an hour to dry, and since the coat wasn't fully even the first time, I just added a second one. Fairly simple, and also you can go back with your base color to further define the shapes. Yeah, not really much to say. It's as far as miniature painting goes, this stage is about as simple as you can get, so let's move on to stuff that is more interesting. Okay, now I decided to try and add some accent colors to this miniature, and also to aid in basically applying transfers later on. So what I did, I got some, believe it's gory red, and I painted a couple of the panels that color. So in this case, I aimed for 2 stripes on the shoulders, and the knee pads. Now, in retrospect, I should have picked a color that really does contrast with the both the terracotta color for the brownish reds camo pattern and also the actual leather brown. So again, I should really start learning these lessons, but oh well, 6th time is a charm, I suppose. I guess my major issue is that the color, the red, especially once we get to the washing stage, really does blend in with the terracotta and actually looks like you'd mistake it for camo pattern, basically. It's unfortunate side effect, but yeah, potentially using a very, very lighter red would work, but that would facilitate many more coats to get the color to be of a sufficient strength to fully cover the previous layers. And well, I'm only aiming for mid quality tabletop gaming pieces at any rate. Some of the more aggressive treatment I did for the miniature will further illustrate this. And one final bit of detail before we move on to bigger and better things is that I'm painting a lot of the articulation components, like the legs and the arms, a grey, hopefully to make this stand out a bit more, and also to imply that, you know, there's worn like cabling or protective material between the various joints on the battle mech. And I'll also paint the PPC just to, you know, make it stand out, just like I did with my Wolverine in the previous battle mech painting video. Okay, now this is something I've been trying that's relatively new. I've been trying to sort of, you know, using techniques that are similar to non-metallic metal. I want to try and paint reflections in the canopy glass. This only has, at least I find this has fairly minuscule effect, but if you know what you're looking for, I think it's pretty neat. Yeah. So to start with, I'm putting an overall base coat of the I think it's a mid blue, a fairly vibrant mid blue on the canopy glass. The purpose of this is just to give us a base to work with. The next stage then basically involves starting to sketch in a lower and an upper for the reflection. Now, I assume at least some of you have been outside, so you probably know what it looks like. Generally, trees and grass are green and it's towards the earth. The sky is blue and white and filled with clouds, and it's generally up. You want to try and literally reflect that in this work. So what I'm doing is I mixed some green into the the bluish color, which makes a bit of a brown, and I'm starting to sort of like layer that in towards the bottom of the canopy glass. And I'm doing the same thing with white on the upper half of the canopy glass. So this takes many passes, and generally this is the kind of thing you have to wheedle away with until you're happy with it. Until you get something that, you know, looks visually good, you just keep going at it. And periodically I also try and blend the two colors together with a very thin layer of the original blue color. It's one of those things which is really hard to demonstrate on camera. You just have to develop an eye for it. One thing I'd definitely also recommend is, since, you know, reflections and the terrain around you generally is not uniform unless you live in a very, very depressing place, you need to put imperfections and slightly more stronger areas of pigment in the reflection. Like, for example, clouds are not uniformly flat white. Put in some shapes, like stipple some variation on, and then you start to see a shape which you like emerge. I definitely recommend watching, it's on Twitch every now and then, well, quite frequently actually, Bob Ross. They periodically rerun his entire, you know, painting happy little trees with Bob Ross. That is a great primer for how to paint a landscape, and you can apply the similar sorts of ideas here to get that reflection of the world around, well, the Griffin, on your miniature. So yeah, just keep at it, and you'll know it when it's done, which is a very, very kind of awful platitude, but that's that's how it works for me, I'm afraid. Another thing I should mention is, I wouldn't sweat the you know, color of the actual hull on the, you know, the canopy bars. I'm going to basically repaint those once I am done with, you know, getting the canopy sorted. So yeah, just again, with miniatures, you work from the inside out as best you can. But in this case, due to the, you know, the whole sequencing of the thing, this is perfectly fine to go back and clean up any mess you make, and don't, like I always say with this, don't sweat the small stuff, which, you know, it's a miniature and it's small, and I'll be going now. Okay, another thing I didn't capture on camera was the preparation for the transfers. So what I've done is, all of the places where I want transfers to go, I put down a layer of gloss varnish. You can either use the Vallejo stuff, the GW stuff, or in my case, I just used my Australian equivalent of Future Floor Shine, which is, you know, does the job well enough as all three products, as the actual modeling products from Vallejo. So that's long since dried, and to start with, I was a bit experimental, and I was trying to figure out exactly which transfers I can use, and since I don't have any official Battletech transfers, I'm mostly just pilfering a lot of old Flames of War stuff I have left over from when I was heavily into that. So, yeah, to start with, I've got the usual stuff. I've covered this off in a video some time ago, where I put down the initial, like, preparation layer. I've let the transfers soak for a bit, and now I'm attempting the application, as you can see, with a moderate degree of success. So yeah, once they're down and it's relatively dry, you have to give them a small layer of the number 2 liquid, the one in the red bottle, and that's what softens the transfers and gets them to sink into the model, which is incredibly useful to give them that painted on look rather than sticking on. So yeah, I definitely recommend being careful with this stage, but the results definitely pay off if you can pull it off. So as the transfers are setting, I periodically go back with that number 2 fluid and just give them another layer as they're drying. Just be careful not to reactivate the transfer like I've done a couple of times. And then, yeah, you'll get a good finish out of them. And I don't think I caught it on camera, but the very final step of that was to give the transfers, to seal in the transfers with another layer of gloss, be it your Vallejo product, your James W. Yeah, your GW gloss varnish, or just your floor polish. Anyway, so just to get some highlighting, I've got some khaki from the Vallejo model game color range, and I'm just giving it an overall dusting. Now, this is for all colors, and this is fine because we want to start basically weathering the shit out of this mech. It's great if, you know, that's the effect you want to achieve, but one thing I will say, that attempting to go down this route will definitely kill any fancy paint jobs you may be trying to do. But given the quality of this miniatures is pretty marginal in the first place, I'm not fussed about, you know, being fairly gung-ho about applying weathering and messing up my paint job. Anyway, on to the more serious work. This is just a simple dry brush, not much to really say other than that. Alright, we've got our dry brush down, and we are, yeah, moving on with the, basically we're going to use our enamels again, just with the, like with the Wolverine and the tank I painted previously. So to start with, we need to get down our overall gloss coat to really protect the paint job from the enamel, which, I say this every time, it's hard on acrylics. Okay, now to ruin the work we've done. So to start with, I've got my acrylic gear out, and the color we'll be using, like the previous time, is MIG Dark Wash. Let's just get a little bit of it on our metallic palette, and let's go ahead. So again, this appears to be basically ruining the paint job, and to a degree that's true. Come on me, hang on a sec. There we go. So just give it an overall coat, about as even as you can get, and make sure you've covered all of the recesses. You really want that colour to stay in the recesses, because when we get to the stage of clearing it off, that'll be our shade layer. Okay, so I've let this thing dry for about a day and a half. So now I'm going to start removing the model, what's it called? The enamel. So to start with, I have got a little bit of my odorless thinner out, but for now I'm just going to stick with the t-shirt. And when I say t-shirt, I actually meant ragged flannel, which is generally from my rag collection. And also cotton buds. With the cotton buds going to into the deeper recesses of the model where the t-shirt has a harder time reaching. So yeah, generally I just wheedle away at it until I've decided I've removed enough of the wash. Now one thing you'll notice is that this has basically applied a filter to all of our base colours, which has really darkened them down, and it's almost completely killed the highlighting. I was a bit on the fence as to whether I wanted to re-highlight it like I did the Wolverine, but ultimately I decided against it because I thought the highlight would come out a bit too stark. But yeah, this is pretty much getting towards the final step, just removing our wash and getting that fully shaded model look happening. I definitely think cotton buds are one of the more underrated tools in the miniature painter's scale model hobbyists' arsenal. So yeah, definitely pick up a bunch. Ideally, a higher quality one with a bud which actually stays intact. That's never thought I'd actually have to worry about the quality of cotton buds, or a Q-tip if you're an American. Okay, so I'm going to apply some After Effects. What I didn't demonstrate was to kill a lot of the gloss. I gave the model an overall layer of matte varnish through a Vallejo matte varnish, that is, through my airbrush. So that has had the effect of killing the gloss and also sealing in a lot of our prior work. So to make the model a little more visually interesting, I want to get a bit of a glow effect going. So to do this, I just first of all put in a layer of white into the PPC barrel, and eventually we'll start to get our glow effect happening by letting some wash do the work for us. So the colour I'm using is specifically the Games Workshop Glaze Guilliman Blue, and I'm going to just splash a little bit into the barrel itself and also get a little bit on the edges of the gun, and also try and flare the colour out a bit to give the impression that there's a blue glow coming from within the weapon itself. I'm just going to keep playing with this until I've decided that I'm happy with the effect that's going in. And finally, the stage which I do not often work with, mostly due to having, well, miniatures on the tabletop have to be handled a lot, right? Pigments are great for scale modelers. They're really bad for tabletop gamers because pigments, unless properly treated, have a tendency to rub off over time, and stain your hands and other miniatures, and it's generally a bad scene. So to start with, I'll demonstrate how I'm going to try and thread this needle by going through the method I used. To start with, I just want to get some dust on the model. Presumably this guy's been walking through a lot of rough terrain, so dust and dirt is going to build up in the crevices. But I do only want a light coating of dust just to almost give a filter to the model, not necessarily clog up the detail, which is a perfectly valid way of using pigments. So I'm just applying that on the legs. And another thing I'm doing is also using the black colour as sort of a soot colour to basically give backblast scorch marks on both the rear of the missile launcher and of the barrel of the PPC, which I'm sort of flaring back with the Q-tip there just to basically try and get more of a colour gradient going. You can do the same effect with paint, you just, can't really play with the paint once it's down and dry. And finally, I'm going to try and get some edging on the model by getting some of my metallic graphite type shavings. Some graphite type shavings, and then try and get some exposed metalwork on the very edges of the model. And I'm applying this with a toothpick because I really want to be sparing with this. Anyway, let's move on to the final result. So I did two more steps off camera. The first was to seal in the pigment by another layer of matte varnish, just to, basically act as a glue to stick it down. The next was finish off the base, which, I did basically using the similar method as detailed in the video of the Wolverine. So that's another mech for the Pirate Horde done and dusted. Yeah, as you can see, the results turned out pretty well. But one thing I will admit is that the enamel wash definitely killed a lot of the highlighting, so I'm not entirely sure if I'd go back and redo it or not next time. Either way, I'm pretty happy with this weathered, heavily used and battle damaged look that my mechs are going for, and this will also be fairly well protected on the tabletop in terms of, the paint job. So that's pretty much it. I hope this is illuminating for you, and it helps inform your own painting. So I'll say it again, don't bother sharing, even if you feel like it. Subscribe if you wanna. I gain no material benefit from it other than creative fulfillment. So thank you for watching if you've made it this far, and I will see you next time.